I first started doing this race, there were maybe 50 boats would start the race. Now they're up to 150. The race has just exploded in popularity. The racing community is very friendly, very nice people. The race itself is very competitive, but at the finish line, everybody's friendly, and we like to tell stories about what happened during the race.
The Texas Water Safari has become a long-founded tradition for a small community of individuals looking to test their limits. Racers follow the San Marcos River to the Guadalupe, passing through a large portion of the Crossroads. It's a grueling 260-mile-plus race from San Marcos down to Seadrift with a 100-hour deadline. On a typical year, challengers are met with various hazards: log jams, snakes, alligators, insects, heat, and difficult wind conditions along the coast. This year, racers faced a combination of low river levels, temperatures in excess of 100 degrees, and high coastal winds, which created a trifecta of dangerous conditions. What started as an expedition in 1962 from San Marcos to Corpus Christi among two friends, Frank Brown and Big Willie George, has led to the Texas Water Safari becoming an annual race that continues to grow. Alan Spels, director of the Texas Water Safari, explains the pair's reasonings for starting an approximately 500-mile trek to the Texas coastlands.
The race actually was formed by Frank Brown and Big Willie, and legend has it that it actually started in a bar over a bet that you could paddle from San Marcos to the Gulf of Mexico, and live off the river while doing it and not take any supplies or gear from anybody.
In 1962, the two set off on their journey, hunting and fishing along the way. They encountered rough waters, alligators, log jams, and bobcat tracks around the Victoria area.
It took them 32 days to paddle all the way down to the coast, and when they finished it, they said, "What a great idea for a great race." And the next year, the Texas Water Safari was born.
Participating in this race with limited resources and hazardous conditions may not sound like an appealing adventure and is nowhere near a relaxing day on the water. So why do they do it? For some, it's a check off their bucket list, and for others, it's a means of proving what they are truly capable of.
When you've crossed that finish line, it's something that's spiritual. It can't be explained, but it's just very emotional and gratifying, and you're exhausted and every part of your body hurts, but then you rest a couple months and you're ready to go again.
I did it on a dare in 2000. We were sitting in a bar, somebody said, "Let's sign up and do it." And we had no idea. We just jumped in the boat and ended horribly. We wrecked our boat in half, about astern. It was real bad, had to get rescued, but we were back next year. And, every year since then, we've got a little bit smarter and learned a little bit more. And it's somebody double dogs dares you, you have to accept,
Everybody that paddles knows about the Texas Water Safari, so I just figured it's about time, and I finally found someone dumb enough to do it with me, and so here we are.
I grew up knowing about the Water Safari. It's something I always wanted to do. I appreciate the challenge, and it's a good adventure.
Despite all the difficulties and dangers of the race, there is something that keeps them hooked and coming back for more.
Yeah, hooked is right. You do it once, and I guess for some people do it once and they say, "I'm never going to do that again," and some people do it once and say, "That's for me."
Coming up, we'll take a deeper look at what to expect from the world's toughest boat race. There are people who find the river to be a beautiful and relaxing place to cool off and escape the summer heat, but there are also those who seek the challenges that Texas rivers hold. Joe Hunt, a veteran of the water safari, recounts his past experiences with the race and the difficulties he encountered.
What makes it so difficult is the race really is in sections, and each one is worse than the one before. And it's not just because you're getting tired, it's because, like, for this first part of it's fun. You got a lot of spectators, the water's clear and clean and pretty, and the rapids and all that, it's fun. But once you get down to below Luling, it starts getting trashy, meaning not trash, but sticks in the river, trees down, log jams, slower river, et cetera, et cetera. Then you get on the Guadalupe, and it's so wide that it's hot all the time. From 8 in the morning until 8 at night, it's hot. And it's still water, it's getting bad. Then you get into the lower rapids down near Cuero and Victoria. And, you know, usually we get there at night. So you're going through, you know, all these crashing rapids, and with the water level this low this year, it's going to be just a boulder garden through there. So at night, it's really challenging. And then you get into the swamps, and by that time, you're hallucinating pretty severely. And you're tired, and you're beat by the sun and everything else, and you've got to wade through that in the dark. And then you get into the log jam at the bottom, and it's from what I've heard, it's like a 2-mile log jam. And you have to either know the cuts to get around it or portage it. And that's just, but you're so tired by that point, it's just torture. And then the bay. And the bay is horrible. I could tell you so many stories about the bay. I've gone across the bay in 2 hours, and I've gone across the bay in 22 hours. It just depends. Sometimes it's impassable. The waves are 5 feet. You can't go across it. When I did it with my wife, Patty, we turned over, how many times, Betty? 40, probably. And finally had to sit it out for a while, wait for the water to come down. I mean, it gets worse and worse and worse and worse.
With Mother Nature as a major element in the conditions of the race, no events are the same. It's the changes of weather patterns that force these racers to remain alert and tuned into current weather conditions.
Every race is different, and this year the biggest challenge is not going to really be log jams, you know, dangerous sweepers and strainers and stuff like that. It's going to be the heat and the humidity and the low water. We're anticipating seeing more cases or issues with electrolyte imbalances, heat stroke, heat exhaustion, dehydration. It's kind of what we're gearing up for on this race.
In May, temperatures fluctuated from the upper 80s to mid-90s. The week of the race, temperatures rose to the hundreds, with race day on June 11th reaching 103 degrees. As if high temperatures aren't enough for these racers to endure, they will also have to deal with the low water levels of both the San Marcos and Guadalupe rivers. Low water means a decrease in current and an added strain on paddlers.
This year we are expecting a lot of heat and low water. You've probably heard other racers say that it's, you know, we're having a heat wave and the river's about 2 feet down. So it's going to be a tough year for our first year. Yeah. So hopefully we will be inspired to do it again when there's a little better conditions.
You know, when it's low water, it's so challenging because the water's in a very narrow cut through the riverbed, and it goes right underneath where everything's growing out over the river, and it just basically cleans you off the boat. So you take a bunch of swims, basically.
It's going to be a tough year. It's going to be a real tough year. The water's so low. It's going to be so hot the next 2 days.
Yeah, this year's easy. Low water and heat.
I think also a lot of conflict in the boat between teammates, you know. No, I'm just kidding. Having to hear the same stories over and over from 38 years ago.
If you paid attention the first time and passed the test, we wouldn't keep having to repeat.
That's true. But no, it's like you said, low water, high heat, and it's tough for these long boats on the top of the race because the course is pretty windy and there's a lot of things to go over and around. And so the smaller boats might have a little advantage early on.
All jokes aside, the Texas Water Safari is not one taken lightly. Making runs through portions of the course and staying physically fit in the off-season is typically how each team trains.
We started training in September. So, you know, you're doing 25-mile runs or, you know, 40, 50-mile runs throughout the whole year. You know, from the wintertime, they have the wintertime races and everything like that.
Long trips on the weekend doing sections of the river, and then during the week we go and do like a shorter thing after work, you know, twice a week at least. So I've been doing that since February.
Saturdays, I drive out here at 8 in the morning, and so I live near Houston, and then we just kind of pick the stretches we want to see and what we know. We've been doing it long enough that we don't feel like we want to see the things, but don't need to have to technically train. We need to be out there just to get our muscles accustomed to being tortured again. I mean, it's more about that. So, there's some spots where you want to see, but a lot of it's just let's go and do something. So,
different sections of the river. We live down low in our nursery, so we train a lot down there. Then we try to make our way up here and train. But the more you train up here, the more you tear your boat up. So, we try to do the whole course as much as we can, so we can have a good idea of what we're getting into, because it's changing every year.
I'd say we've got about 120 hours, would you say, something like that this year. We just San Marcos and Guadalupe every weekend.
Yep, a lot of time in the boat, and I do a lot of yoga, just trying to stay, limber, lean as best you can, but nothing replaces time in the boat.
Well, like I said, we went through all the different sections. We've done the top section a lot just because we both live here in San Marcos and we're familiar with the more technical parts of the river.
But we try to stay strong, lift weights. I've tried to do a lot of work outside to get acclimated to this heat because it hasn't been that hot up until just recently.
Well, so year one, I trained with a different partner, and then they canceled the race. That was kind of the height of COVID. And then year two, Lee and I started training together, and really we just train on the river. So we train different sections of the river. So by the time you hit race day, you've run the entire river at one point or the other. We've trained in the daytime, we've trained at night, we've done short runs, long runs. We've run into full-grown horses standing in the middle of the river in the night.
We start roughly in January, and just about every weekend, at least one day a weekend, sometimes 2 days both weekends. So it's roughly a 4 or 5 month training cycle.
Whenever we can, I have to travel like 6 hours to get here to train, but just whenever you can. My teammates have seen way more of the river than me, but if you can come every other weekend or something like that, it usually works out. And then trading information, that helps.
So, and we try, like after Christmas to do the endurance, do the running and weights and whatnot, and get to the river when we can, and stay outside as it gets hot. Yeah.
Yes, that's a big feature.
I mean, we're both collegiate athletes, and we grew up doing stuff outside. We're outside all the time, so we're used to the heat. We're used to working hard, but going that far is a little different, but we'll get there.
Every team has their own training process, and even though the majority train whenever possible, there are some who see it as unnecessary.
Hoyt doesn't believe in the T word.
In the 22 years I've done it, we don't train. We've been together in about once this year, so we just work out the kinks once we get out there. If you can't work them out there, then you don't need to be doing it. But no training.
That said, we live on the river out in Junction on the South Llano River, and so we paddle for fun, and we spend time on the river throughout the year. But unlike everybody else, or most of the other people here, we don't spend a whole lot of time specifically training.
Mental training.
Yeah, mental training.
We do a lot of puzzles, like 1,000-piece puzzles, and don't get up till we're finished. That's kind of stuff. So when we get frustrated with each other, we just have to stay and be calm.
Physical and mental preparedness is not all that is necessary to get through this race. There are items that are essential to the health and operations of each paddler.
Definitely the electrolytes.
Gatorade. Ooh, that was a little plug. The paddles.
Yeah. I mean, we've got a couple of specialized things. I mean, we've got a Garmin that helps keep track of, all of our waypoints, how fast we're going. That's pretty important to me in the back. These guys don't care about it as much. They're just paddling.
You paddle. You paddle in your water.
Yeah, obviously your food's very important, but the light's incredibly important too. You paddle through the night, 24 hours a day, and so the light and being able to see obstacles in the river at nighttime is huge.
These are river charts, and they tell me exactly where I am all the time and how far it is to the next bridge or checkpoint or something I'll recognize, so that I know, because if I don't know, I start getting depressed or like, oh God, this is just going on forever. Because you've got 2 stretches on the race this year. One will be 7 to 8 hours and one will be 5 to 6, and they're back to back. So you're gonna see one bridge in about 11 or 12 hours, 13 hours. It's very disillusioning if you don't kind of know where you are. Yeah.
This year, I think water's going to be the key. As much water as you can carry with you on the long stretches, that's going to be to stay hydrated. That's the biggest thing, I think, this year.
Heavy dose of long suffering and patience to put up with him for 70 hours.
So when I get tired, I just shoot a hot sauce. Kind of wakes me up and I keep on paddling. That's all. I mean, that's the purpose of it.
If that won't do it, nothing in the boat will do it.
That's right. That's right.
The most important thing, teammates.
Teammates are definitely an important part of how these paddlers work their way to the finish line, but not all teammates are on the boat. Every boat is required to have a team captain who provides them with food, ice, water, and everything needed to keep these racers hydrated and fueled. After all the preparation that goes into the race, the paddlers would not be able to make it without their team captains. They drive to every checkpoint to refill the racers' water jugs and assess their well-being. The role of the team captain is one of most importance. They ensure the health and safety of every member on their boat, and they are there to help make the difficult calls if they feel a member of their boat should not complete the race.
The role of the team captain is to monitor the health and safety of their teams that they have. And so they will make that decision along with their team whether or not they're in any kind of shape to continue to go forward or not. And if they request help, then we step in and then help out at that point.
Up next, paddlers talk about what has gone wrong in past years. The Texas Water Safari isn't known as the world's toughest canoe and boat race for no reason. With such a long journey in hostile conditions, there's a lot that can go wrong for these paddlers. If something goes wrong with their boat, they are only allowed to use what they have on board and any river trash they may find in their location.
One year, we tore part of our boat and we found a piece of PVC pipe along the river and poked holes in and turned it into a piece of a frame of the boat to make it work.
Many times I've knocked big holes in my canoe. I've had to patch it. You just have to pull over and let it dry and duct tape it the best you can and just get back in the river and keep moving.
That's the main thing, yeah. That the Gorilla Tapes comes in handy for a lot of different things. Zip ties, Gorilla Tape and zip ties.
Although river trash is often useful, some repairs are more difficult. One year, when participant Ito Abmarin was traveling with a group of paddlers, they broke their boat in half.
Well, we tried to fix it. We spent, probably 3 hours collecting twine and little whatever we could find in the field next door, and we had some duct tape and stuff, so we pieced it together, but we only made a few more miles. Couldn't really make it go.
My first solo, I had a broken rudder, my lights didn't work, bad bay. The bays are always the worst.
Boat issues aren't the only problems one can face while traveling the San Marcos and Guadalupe rivers. After spending hours and days paddling, it can be easy to get turned around.
2010, we got lost for a couple hours down below Victoria. That was fun. Flipping over the bay, that's probably the most treacherous feeling. I mean, maybe not always that bad, but it certainly feels treacherous after hours of paddling. So.
Well, we last year we got lost in the cuts for a little while. Lost about 6 hours going back and forth and That took us a little bit of time for sure. Yeah.
Last year, once we got out to the bay, we were crossing the bay and had a big storm blow in, and we were about 15 minutes from the finish, and got capsized in the waves and ended up having a 2-hour add-on, getting beat down out in the bay. So pretty wild.
It's never over till it's over, until you hit the finish line, because something could go wrong real quick and could take you out. There was a boat beside us that could see the finish line, and the wind took their boat. And there was a father-daughter team last year that did not finish right, and they could see the finish line, but just like that. So you never know.
You know, I've almost drowned a couple of times, been pinned, you know, come around a corner and you get into an area where there's no room to maneuver and it sweeps you under a tree, and you kind of get hung up in there temporarily until you can fight your way out of it. Things like that are very scary.
Weaving in and around the river can be very disorienting, and after spending days on the water in the middle of the heat, it can cause some to lose touch with reality.
One year, me and my partner, we lost focus on what we were doing. This is down towards the end of the race, and we pulled over at this old abandoned fishing camp, and we started pulling junk out of their junk pile, and we were just putting, we called it metal art. We were putting metal art together, and this went on for probably couple of hours. We didn't even know what we were doing anymore, because our minds had just drifted off. And finally, after a while, we kind of came out of it, and we were able to finish the race.
Coming up, we'll learn about the infamous Hallucination Alley. Just past Victoria, Texas, behind Invista, is known as Swinging Bridge, or Hallucination Alley. After being on the water for days, it's not uncommon for exhaustion and the lack of sleep to set in and cause hallucinations. In fact, the waiver that participants must sign even states that amnesia and hallucinations are not uncommon.
I've seen so many crazy things on this race. You push yourself so hard, and you don't want to stop and rest. And so you end up, they call it hallucinations, you end up seeing a lot of crazy things that really aren't there.
I see presidents. I'll see like you see on a quarter of George Washington or whoever it is. I'll see that in the trees. I see many years I've seen what looks like parade floats, like you'd see in Macy's, you know, Dumbo over here. And I mean, it just goes on. I mean, I see the parade going on for miles and miles. And then one year I saw carnations that were like 8 feet in diameter, and they were everywhere, big, huge carnations. It was really weird. But, you know, I've heard so many stories that are interesting, like the guy that said he saw, or his partner said, I got to get out and answer the phone. And he said, well, there's no phones down here. And he said, well, no, it's my wife. She's calling me to see if I'm okay. And he said, there's no phones down here. And the guy pulls the boat over to the bank, jumps out and goes up to a tree and starts talking like he's on a payphone, talking to his wife. And the guy's sitting in the boat listening and hears his wife talking back to him on the tree. So, I mean, weird stuff happens. Really weird stuff, because you lose your brain completely. You know, most of the people, the really gung-ho ones, will try and stay awake both nights. Obviously, the super fast boats, they're only out there one night. They're lucky, but most of the boats go into the second night. And if you don't get off the river by 60 hours, you go into the third night and you're in the swamp. And that's not good. So in my case, that's what I'm trying to do, is get through the swamp and out into the bay at least 60 hours.
I would say the worst thing, I don't really see, you see the trees move, you see leaves, but we were traveling second day, it was the middle of the day, and I looked down the river, and I saw an RV parked, and I stopped the boat. It was pink, and it had peace signs, and I said, we can't. And he's like, why did you stop? And I said, because there's an RV, and then somebody parked it in the middle of the river, we cannot get around it. So that was...
I'm hoping to see that RV this year.
That's a small point.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's really kind of loopy there. Actually, the worst part for me is there's the section after the pump house, and then kind of before you get to, I forget what the road is, but it's before 59. But it's weird there because it's the most light you've seen in a while because the lights from the city are there. So your eyes are kind of overstimulated and looking for something. So it is, a lot of times you're like, is that an alligator? No, it's a log. Is that an alligator? No, it's a log. Oh, look at that log. Oh, it's an alligator. So it's more misinterpretation than anything else. Nothing so.
A lot of clowns. I see a lot of clowns in the trees. That's for the most part, yeah.
Well, I got one I like to tell, which is, I don't know, I probably shouldn't. But anyway, there's one time, second night, I was hallucinating so bad that, you can see him there. See the guy back there? Looked like he was actually paddling. It was horrible. So anyway, no, I've had plenty. My favorite was, again, it was below Victoria, and I couldn't see the river as a river. I was seeing it as a road with houses on the side instead of trees. And I couldn't shake it. But in order to keep going, I just put the boat on the dotted white line on the middle of the road. And so that's how we went down that section of the river until it kind of cleared up.
Yeah, I've had it just where, kind of like the Matrix, where everything is sort of pixelated and just weird, colorful, and then you're kind of like thinking there's people on the shore, or thinking, hey, what's this house up here, or what's that light, and your partner's going, what are you talking about? And it is pretty cool. The shadows and the trees kind of morph into things, and sometimes you and your partners can see the same things. That's always fun. And other times you're seeing things all by yourself and trying to tell them to look, and they're not knowing what the heck you're talking about.
That's not there, man.
Yeah.
Oh.
While most racers see beautiful or strange objects in the river, others are presented with their own mortality as they push their body to its limits.
One time I had a funeral procession that was following me along the river. I think they were waiting for me to keel over so they could put me in the casket. And they kept following me. Every time I looked over, they were standing there waving at me. A bunch of guys with big top hats on. And I just kept paddling faster to get away from them.
Coming up, we'll explore the events of this year's race. Paddling over 260 miles to Seadrift, the teams who make it within 75 hours are greeted with a banquet and awards ceremony on the day before the deadline. Those who complete the race aren't presented with prize money, but instead a meal, a patch, and sometimes a plaque or trophy. Though they are happy to receive their badge of honor, they don't do it for the badge. They do it to fulfill something within themselves. This year's race was one like no other.
It was enough to make a grown man cry, which is why I broke my face. It hurt so bad. It was hot, and it was low water, and the log jams were pretty bad in the south end down there, and the wind today was just ridiculous. We were in probably, 40, 45 mile an hour winds and 3 and 4 foot waves, and you just can't cross anything. I'm leading to the port a little bit. That's a standard thing that happens in the safari. I don't even know why, but everybody winds up leaning that way. The thing is, I'm almost 70, and this week will be my birthday, and I'm just wondering if I can keep doing this, because I fell half dozen times off of dams or, riprap or logs that you're crawling over, stuff like that. It's real hard on your body. And my diet apparently wasn't very good, although I thought it was really being cutting edge with some of the stuff we tried this year. But I've had cramping in my legs, up in my thighs, which I've never had. So it's just a tough year, but we got to the finish line, and that's the main thing.
It was definitely one of the most challenging. There's been challenging races. Every race is unique. There's always something new. There's always some new challenge. But this one definitely, probably, with the low water and the high temperatures, and just knowing that you're not going to move very fast, and you just got to be, stay focused and understand that it's a long race. But no, I don't think anybody really expected what was going to happen here in the bay. That was going to hold everybody up like it did.
We actually had a very good first day. We were running a real strong first place in our division, and everything was going good. And then Saturday night and Sunday morning, we started slowing down a little bit because we were both feeling it, all the effort it took to get to that point. And our competition caught up with us and passed us. So we were a little down about that. But then we got here, and the bay was so rough, it was affecting everybody, that we were able to pass them again back here in the bay to the finish line. It was just a back and forth event.
Tried to kill me. A lot.
It was, we anticipated it was going to be hard, but it was next level. Low water is bad, heat's bad, wind is bad, but you put all three together and it just drains your body and they compound, and so it was one of the hardest things probably ever done.
I think the good Lord was in heaven with a little control board saying, look, they're starting to feel good about their race. Let's send them some more wind. I think he was picking on us, is what I think. It was a long, really tough race, but we made it, so we're super happy about that, for sure. He did try to kill me, though.
By far the hardest race I've ever been a part of. The heat was just sometimes almost unbearable, but with the proper clothing and splashing your clothes with water in this wind, it really helped out. And then also it being a low water year, so having to get up a lot and walk the boat and things like that.
Just really sleepy right now. Then I have to assess the rest of my body when I can feel it.
And moving slower and pinpointing certain aches and pains and trying to straighten up leaves. And other than that, thankful we have another finish. Yeah.
Yeah, the race compared to last year it's night and day. Last year we had about 85% finish. It was a higher water year. And this year we're probably looking at between 60 to 65% are going to finish. In fact, today by the banquet, we only had 34 teams in. And last year at this time for our awards banquet, we had 78 teams in. So it's a big drop off this year from last. But after seeing the conditions, that's to be expected. Low water, high heat, and 2 to 3 foot waves out in the bay. It's been a rough year. We've had years that have been hotter, lower water, and rougher bay, but we've never had all three bad at the same time. It'd be like low water, but at cooler temperatures, and an easy bay, or a bad bay, low water, but cool. So this year we got all three, and I think that's why you had this cumulative effect where a lot of racers were pulling out and not finishing. I don't know the exact number that have been hospitalized, but it's been maybe a half dozen. It's kind of been a normal year, and there's been nothing catastrophic. We've had some years where people have spent several days in the hospital. This year it's been mostly for dehydration or heat exhaustion, and they go in, get an IV, and they're released 4 hours later.
Despite multiple undesirable conditions, roughly 51% of paddlers made it by the deadline. With a race this intense, misfortune can strike at any moment. For some, it can cause a setback, and for others, it can mean not crossing the finish line.
We had a couple boats wrapped, but that's standard. It's we have people wrap their boats around rocks, trees, and go under log jams and get them submerged, and so wouldn't be the safari without a few wrapped boats.
There's always issues. When you're under that much tension and fatigue and everything else, yeah, there's always issues, but...
Let's see, we tried to break our boat really badly, and we got out of both of those jams, which would have ended our race. He tried to drown me. I had to swim after my paddle. We went to sleep in an ant bed, apparently.
Just the usual safari stuff, I think, times 10. Seadrift blessed us with wind, like an impossible bay crossing.
About mile 173, we hit this really swift rapid, and it sweeps our boat a little too far right. We ended up hitting a boulder head on. It threw me off, and my other partners fell out as well, and ended up turning it sideways and pinning it against a tree. And so it ended up breaking the boat a little bit, and we had to get rescued. But we were able to get the boat out after all that. And so I'll just take it to the guy that made it, and he'll fix it. And off to next year, yeah.
Nothing major. We had some temper flare-ups on the last day, which is pretty common, You know, you're telling somebody to paddle harder, like they're not paddling as hard as they can. It's just stupid, So, but it's a grind. I get choked up over this stuff. It's stupid, but it's just so hard, and you can't get out. You got to keep going and get to the finish. So, people who've never done it just don't have a clue. It's really tough. I mean, I was in the Marines and I went through a lot of stuff there, but this is harder in a lot of ways because it's so prolonged. It just goes on and on and on.
When people think of a race or competition, most think of rivalry, setting out to win the race and beat their opponents. However, for most, the greatest opponent is oneself.
I think for me, doing it more and more every year, I think yourself probably can be your biggest opponent, and it's a mental game. It's knowing that the race is long, and it's lost on the upper, but it's won on the lower. So you can mess up and you can hurt yourself and you can damage your boat on the upper river and lose a race, but you win a race down here in the lower part of the river and then the bay. So you keep that mind focus, you gotta keep those positive vibes and understand that you get past, halfway through a race that there's still an opportunity for you to come back later on. So never close that window and just stay positive throughout the whole experience.
I don't feel like that I'm in a race against anybody. It's always against myself, my mentality and physical, being hydrated and everything. So, I would say my biggest opponent is the river and how it's going to treat, what it's like and the weather, because I'm just here to finish. I'm a competitor, of course, but there are far more seasoned veterans out here that know what they're doing and finish in the top 5. So,
Yeah, I think the environment is definitely the opponent, especially if you consider, the first place boat or your best time could vary between, as many as 30 hours depending on the conditions, the bay, the water. But you're definitely racing the opponents. But again, most of them, you like them. If something bad happens, it might be a good story, but you're never kind of looking for something bad to happen to your opponent because they're your friends.
Oh, the environment. We don't really worry about our opponents so much. We know who's racing, but it's more of just a self-check every year for us.
Mm-hmm. We kind of have a fun camaraderie with the Cowboys. And so we were ahead of them at Staples, and they got ahead of us, and then we could pass them again, all the way down to they were in the bay. And we're like, bye. And then everybody's bay just kind of fell apart. And they still beat us, but that's okay. Kind of keeps you going.
Oh, definitely the race. But, you know, the thing is you don't really, I mean, I'm not going to compete against these guys in the 6-man boats. You know, that's just not even in my mind. But, you know, we're racing along and there'll be another 3-man boat, which was what I was running. So we'd start talking to them, you know, and they'd talk back to us. And so we're racing against them. And then your best friends who you've learned over the years, you kind of race. You know, one of my best canoeing buddies is James Ward. And I told him before the race, I said, I only have 2 goals here. One is to finish and the other is to beat you. So, you know, that's the way it goes. It's camaraderie.
For some, paddling may just be a hobby, but for others, it's a lifestyle.
It's a lifestyle because of, you know, you can take it in everywhere. You can take it in, and you can do it year round. You can go different places and do it. And there's definitely a large community, and it's a very, very friendly and a very fun community to be a part of. But it's also, when it comes to the safari and training, it can put strains on relationships, on family and stuff, because you have to dedicate. This race takes a lot of your time, and if you want to compete and do well, you're gonna have to sacrifice some time somewhere. So, yeah, I would say it's probably a lifestyle. Yeah.
You know, for me, it's like it keeps me in shape. So it's something that when you start something so far out and you train for months and months and then you finally get to it, it's just all the hard work you put in. It's, you know, it's probably, I guess, you know, kind of a lifestyle really, you know? So I'm glad that the person that got me in it, got me into it because, you know, I didn't know what I was missing out
on. I mean, a lot of people always use the word community with this group. You know, Texas has a great canoe racing scene. You know, Martindale is and Victoria are kind of right at the heart, just as one of the best, you know, paddling rivers run right through the 2 of them. So it's definitely a lifestyle. You know, your friends, your acquaintances, people that you'll know for you know, 10, 20, 30 years over your life. You get to watch kids grow up, you know, that sort of thing. But so both, but it's a huge part of life. And there are a lot of these people that do it year in, year out, every year.
For those on the outside, this event may seem like any other competition, but the Texas Water Safari is so much more. It's a group of individuals with a common interest, an interest that creates a bond.
Pretty tough race. A good race, though. Everybody had a good time. Big attendance, friendly people. To your listeners, they should try it once, you know, just for fun. Just give it a try.